G'day guys, welcome to the show. I'm really excited. We've just hit 25,000 subscribers on YouTube. Heartfelt thanks to you all. We've also had a lot of followers ask for lure painting, and they want to know how it's done from start to finish. So I thought I'd visit the home of Darren Dizzy Borg. He's a master lure maker. He really knows his stuff. He explains things really well. So once you get that lure out, I guarantee that you're going to have a finished product once you learn and watch this episode. Of course, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and comment if you have any other questions. Darren's going to be looking at those comments and we're going to be answering all those questions. Enjoy this episode. We head to the man shed of the master lure maker himself, Darren Dizzy Borg.
So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show and explain a little bit about the basic art of painting a fishing lure. We're going to show you the stencils we use. We're going to show you the bought stencils, the homemade stencils, and at the end of the video we're going to show and tell you where you can get all of these materials to be able to paint your own lures. So what we've got here is we've got a selection of stencils. We've got 2 stencils here that you can buy. So this stencil here allows me to put the sort of pattern you can see here on the top or the sides of a fish. This stencil here allows me to do a little bit more detailed work. In here you've got all different types of fins you can put on the side of a lure, and in the inside you can use all these to do gill patterns, mouth patterns. There's multiple things you can use when you buy a stencil like this, and you'd be surprised for $30 odd I think they are, you can really get some good use out of a bought stencil like this. Apart from the bought ones, we go to something which is a little bit more basic. Scale pattern stencil. So what I do with the scale pattern stencil is I like to make them up and then stretch them so that they pretty much are going to hold their position, and I just use sticks and super glue and glue them together. So it allows me then, when I put the lure down, I can then place the stencil over the top, and when I hold it down it holds everything in place, and then I can spray it with my other hand, and when it's finished I can then take it off the lure. The other stencil that is very popular to use is a comb or one of these hair pieces that the girls buy. I don't know, I pinch them. You just go into the bathroom and knock off all your missus's gear. If you place it over the lure like so, you can get yourself a pattern that comes out like that. Now if you want to make a pattern a little bit different, you can move it down a bit lower and you can spray it so you can get the V pattern instead of the wide pattern. And if I want something different again, I move it up completely where these all little tiny holes. And then again, because I do a lot of small lures, I've got these ones where I've blocked them off, so I only get the lines spread out even further apart. This allows me to have 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of stripes I can put on a fish, on a lure, with the one stencil. So what I've done here is I've got a lure that I've made to the painting stage, and I've just given it a basic white undercoat. Is where we're going to start with. So whether you're using a plastic lure or a wooden lure like I've got here, you'll always need to start with an undercoat. Sometimes the plastic lures you'll find you'll need a clear undercoat, so if you want to keep the see-through look. Otherwise you can always just go with a basic white undercoat. If you're doing certain colours that might be say colour change or metallic, a lot of the time you'll use a black undercoat to start with, but you'll learn these as you go along. There's lots of basics, lots of information on the internet to tell you, but we're starting with white and we're going to go from here and show you what it looks like when it's finished. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put it into something to hang on to, like so that we can actually move it around and we can paint the whole thing. So we're going to paint this first, and we might go with, say, let's go with green. So we take the green off, we're going to give it a shake. We're going to take our airbrush out, make sure everything's working all right. Now this is a detail airbrush which allows me to control how much paint and air comes out by the dial at the back. I've also got my other airbrush here, which I use a lot for when I'm painting bulk lures and they're all getting a simple coat over them. This one has a 0.35 needle, this one has a 0.2 needle. This one allows me to do a lot more finer detail work. I've also got a third airbrush, which is somewhere around here, which is a 0.5 needle for when I'm doing really big lures. I need to cover them fast with paint. So getting the right airbrush is pretty important for the work you want to do. If you've got something with a 0.5 needle and you want to do fine work with a stencil like this, it's not going to work. It's going to look terrible. You need to make sure you get that 0.2 or 0.3 for the finer work, and you go to a larger needle when you want to cover your lure with paint faster. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little bit of this fluorescent green in as a base. We're going to make this lure probably go green and gold. We'll do some gold over the top in different ways and see how it comes out. So we've got our colour in there. We'll make sure that we've got it set up high enough. Now, everyone's different. I probably paint, when I'm painting a full colour over a lure like this, at about 20 to 30 psi, depending on the airbrush you've got. And as you go down to finer detail work, you will find you'll need to drop the pressure down as low as 5 psi for when you get down to the real fine stuff. So there we have it, all covered in paint. Now, because we're using water-based paints here, we have to heat set these paints to make sure that they're going to be dry enough for us to continue on and put patterns over the top. So what we use is, I've got a heat gun. You can use a hair dryer. It's if you could pinch it from your missus. I never had that much luck. And we're just going to go over it quickly. Easiest way to tell if it's drying enough is you'll see the shine will start to come away from the paint when you're using the heat on it, and it'll start to get a little bit dull, and then you know you've dried your paint. Okay, now we've got it heat set. We'll take it off. We've got it all ready to go, and what we'll do is we'll put it down on a nice rag that I like to use to paint on, because I find painting it on here gets extremely hard to get the stencils to lie over it the way you want them to. So we'll go this way with this one, and what we'll do is we'll put gold across the back on a stencil pattern. So now we've got to pull out our gold, and we'll use the other airbrush now. We'll turn down the pressure so it's not too high. Paint in. I always give it a bit of a test run to make sure it's working, either on a bit of paper or the backboard, just so you know you got everything going properly, because sometimes if you get a clump in there and it gives a bit of a spit of paint, it can sort of ruin what you're doing. So the secret's always to give it a test. And the other thing I've learned is I never start the paint on the job first up until I'm doing detail work. I like to start off the job, so I'll start spraying it here and then I'll work myself onto the job. So we go here and then we come on. So we're just going to go up and down. So we'll put everything onto there now. We can release. A stencil. And that gives us our basic scale pattern across the back. So a lot of the time we'll start with light colours and work our way to darker colours when we're painting lures, but when you're doing a bit more of the detail work that you want to put in, sometimes you'll find that the light colours will work better over the top of a darker colour. So next we're going to lay this stencil, and as you can see up the top here, I've got it blocked off a little bit so I can put it over where the face and the eyes are going to be. We're going to lay this stencil over the top of the lure like this, and we're going to paint it so that we get a little bit of a V stripe at the top. It's going to be a reverse stripe that we normally would do. Make sure we get everything sitting the way we want it. It's pretty important, because if you don't have the lure sitting where you want it to sit properly, then it's going to be extremely difficult to get the stripes to come out the way you want them to. And the beauty with these plastic combs is you can actually make it bend to form across the back nicely of that lure. So now we're going to go and put some stripes on. Check yep, everything's working fine. So go off lightly, and then I'm coming in closer as I go, because I've got a detail brush. So there you go, you've got the stripes now feeding their way back into the scales that are on the back. So we'll go across and we'll do the other side next, but before we do that, we'll just run some heat across these to make sure that they set and we don't ruin the paint as we go. As you can see, what we're trying to do there is we're trying to get those stripes just to come up but not completely on the back. So both sides we've got them to wrap around a little bit, and we've got the scale pattern across the back. So now what we'll look at doing is we've got them on there. Now we'll look at finishing off the bottom of the belly and finishing off the tire underneath of the lure. Now I'm going to look at putting the belly colours on. So we're going to try and make the belly colours mix into these colours a little bit better than that, and then we'll probably put a pearl colour across the bottom to make it look like a real fish. So it's going from a darker transition at the top to a lighter transition at the bottom. And because we want to put green across the bottom and we want to take away from the fluoro, we're going for a pearl green. What I like to do is I like to look at the bottom of the containers of paint, and I put them against the lure, so I get an idea of what I'm looking at. Now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, this one here is probably too dark. This one here is probably the right color I want, because I need it to go a little bit lighter as we move down into the belly so we can get the contrast right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this color to paint the sides of the belly here and get it ready. So you can see the effect we're going for there. We want that pearl to blend in. We'll do the same on this side now. So what we've gone for there is we've gone for that green being lighter than the fluoro green, is now giving us a little bit of contrast. Now we're going to come back over that with a little bit of pearl white across the belly here, and we're going to give that a little bit more contrast from dark to light, as in top to bottom of the lure, so it looks like a real fish contrast. As you can see, we're starting to get a bit of contrast there, a lot lighter on the belly. So now you can see you've got a light belly, you've got a light pearl green, and then you're getting into the stripes and the fluoro green. And when we clear all this at the end, that fluoro will start to jump out a lot more than what it is at the moment. So I was able to do that quite comfortably because I was using a 0.2 needle in my detail brush. If I was using one of the other airbrushes, which throws a lot more paint and a lot wider, I would have trouble getting the belly to be pearl white and leaving that slight bit of green on the edge. So it's pretty important that when you're doing a lot of this painting that you have the correct needle in your brush, or you have a few different brushes with a few different needle sizes that will allow you to choose between them to get the effect that you want. Okay, we've dried the base of the lure where we've just painted. We've got the heat gun onto it, made sure that we've heat set the paint. And what we're going to do now is we're going to put it down, we're going to put a little gill on the front of it here before we put the eyes on. So what I've done is I've had a look at this stencil, which, as I said, it's quite a good stencil. This is probably one of the most used stencils I have here. I consider these to be detailed stencils, so where you can put some actual detail into your lure. So I'm going to use this little area here, just here, to create a gill effect on the side of the lure. So I put it down and I hold it over the top like so. And what I've done is I've put some black paint in my airbrush, and if you watch closely, I've got, see, a little tiny, I can almost write if I want to with my airbrush. That's how detailed I can get to with it, and that's what you've got to do if you want to do this properly. And the secret here is when I shoot, I'm actually not shooting the paint on the lure, I'm shooting it onto the stencil. And what I'm doing is I'm allowing the overflow of the paint to go onto the lure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot it so it only goes on the stencil. So I'm on the stencil, then I'm moving across to the edge. So I'm only going to shoot along the edge of the stencil and not actually onto the lure. I'm just going to let all the extra overflow go over. You've got to be patient with these two because you can't just whack and they're done really fast. They do take a little bit of time to do it properly. So as you can see there now, I've got what I want. I take it away and I've got my gill pattern. So what we now need to do is we need to roll it over to the other side. We need to turn our stencil over, and the hardest part of the lot is we need to match it up so that it looks correct on both sides. So I tend to take it and hold it, have a good look so that I can see a line, bring it over, check to make sure it's where it needs to be here, and then go back over. So I can see now that my gill is going to be in the correct spot on this side. There's your gill pattern. One side, one the other side. We check it at the top. They're both coming over in the same area. So we're going to put the eyes on now. So with the eyes, I've got a sheet of eyes here. And just remember, at the end of the episode, we're going to explain to you where you can get your eyes, where you can get your bits of super glue, your little utility knives, everything you need to get to be able to do your own lures at home. So this is how I like to put my eyes on. These do come with a sticky side, but if I find that when you just stick them down, they tend to come off lures reasonably easy. So what I prefer to do is use a little bit of super glue. You don't need a lot. It's just a dab of super glue on, just to make sure that the eye is going to stay on the lure for when you paint it. So I put a little dab on. That's way too much, so just take a little bit off. So you can see there's just a little tiny dab there, and there's also a little mark on that lure. As you can see, that little black mark. So I'm going to utilize this eye to go straight over that little spot to cover up that little imperfection that we got there. Now it's starting to look like a fish. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clear coat our lure, and you're going to get to see some of these colours and patterns jump out, and you'll get to see how good the lure actually looks at the end. Airbrush, 2-pack, clear paint, and we just put it on. Not too thick because you don't want it to run. Over the whole thing, and everything starts to jump. You can see the color transition now from the belly to the light green to the fluoro green, the stripes, and the scale pattern on top. So this is the 2-pack clear, which takes about 3 to 4 hours to dry. You can get single pack clear coats that you can dip lures in or spray them, and they'll also do the same job. And now we're going to run through a little bit about where you can get some of the materials to do your own lures at home. First thing you're going to need is paints. Now if you want paints, you can buy a lot of this in Australia. I actually source everything I have from companies in Australia, so it's quite easy to shop in Australia. Createx paints, Wicked paints, you can buy them all online from the Airbrush Megastore Australia. You can also get all of these great stencils in the same place when you buy paints. So if that's the paint you're after, that's where you can go to get it. If you're not sure or you want to look somewhere else, just Google it. There's heaps of them out there that can give you what you need, and there's multiple different types of water-based paints you can use. I just use Createx because I find their colour range has been quite helpful for me over the years with some of the colours I've had to paint. So when you're chasing your eyes, I get my eyes at Kingston Lures, which is an online store, and Fishing Unlimited, also an online store. So you can go to either of these and you'll find all your lure components you need to be able to make your own lures at home. Now if you've got any questions, remember to put them in the comments section down below. Don't forget, give us a big thumbs up, and we'll see you next time when you subscribe to Coastfish TV.